Okay.
Good. Hey, Davey. It's good to be back with you. So we're getting into a little bit of a rhythm here and just sharing and talking, shooting the breeze, just having good conversation.
Yeah, I just
I
have to
love,
say right at the beginning that you are looking more like me every day.
yeah, which is a scary thought. Yeah. All right. So I love conversation and dialogue, and sometimes through conversation we discover what we know. And Dave, I think that's why I just so enjoy chatting with you, because things begin to emerge that are there, but that you hadn't quite put words to. And I think that goes back to many, many conversations around coffee, which we would have when you were in South Africa, but now it's done over the internet. But we thought we would just carry on doing a conversation on principles. Is it possible that if we apply good principles in good times and tough times, that the consistent application of good, healthy, wholesome principles can move us through turbulent water? And yesterday we spoke about don't be driven by fear. And we also spoke a little bit about the impermanence of most things, possibly of everything.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to take up with you today, because I don't know if you remember at all, but you actually used the word sowing and reaping when you started the conversation yesterday. And when you used the term sowing and reaping, I was immediately thinking, there's a good principle. And then you sort of went in a different way. Talk to me about sowing and reaping.
The problem is there are so many good principles, you could talk about. So sowing and reaping is a fascinating one. There's another way of expressing it, which is the law of attraction, which you also might be familiar with. So the law of attraction is basically, what you say, what you continually are saying, will in turn come back to you in some level. Also, the principle of sowing and reaping is not just a financial one. If you sow, if you're generous in your giving, usually those people that are generous in their giving have always seem to have a plenty. And there is a principle of generosity as a lifestyle in finance, but also generosity and lifestyle of being kind, being generous, watching what you speak and being careful of what you sow with the words. As a man think, so he is a phrase that my parents always drilled into me. I think one of the principles in a time of a crisis like this is to be careful what we sow in a time of crisis, because we may only reap that, as we're coming out, and we need to be careful of what we are saying, because often if we say things out loud, it reinforces the way we think about something, which has an indirect effect on our moods and then, of course, our actions. And so in a time of crisis, we do need to pay attention to what we are sowing, not only into the present now, but also into the future that will be. That sense of law of attraction and sowing our words and our thoughts to them connected very strongly.
Yeah. I love, I think it's Andy Stanley who beautifully says that today's actions lead to tomorrow's destination. And I've always found that a very, very helpful quote. And it's the realization that today and tomorrow are connected. Yeah. And it is possible that in difficult times like these, we might forget that. So a danger, for example, you spoke about the word generosity, could be that right now, because we're under pressure, we might lose our generosity.
Very good.
And yes, perhaps maybe there is a little bit less cash to go around, and there are certain wise decisions that we need to make. But it would certainly be a core to most of us: don't lose generosity, keep sowing generously in some form or another, because today's actions are connected to tomorrow's destination.
Yeah, you see, in a time of crisis, this is so good conversation, Mike. In a time of crisis, protectionism is what rules. We protect our cash flow in terms of business. And what we're finding right now around the world is people are not paying their suppliers. And so by not paying your suppliers, the suppliers are not able to pay someone else. And ultimately, everyone suffers. People are put out of work because they can't be can't afford to pay it, because protectionism is the opposite. So if you sow protectionism around your own business, around your own life, you will reap protectionists who are protecting themselves. And it's the whole thing of building walls around you. Your kingdom actually gets smaller, not bigger. And I think in a time of crisis, everything in us wants to lager, that sense of coming and drawing the curtains closed and pulling everything around ourselves and becoming an island. And actually, the opposite is true. In a time of crisis, we probably need to open our hearts wider and need to tear down the fences, be more vulnerable, sow more generosity in terms of not only finance, but words and love and wisdom, and be more open than closed. I think that's probably the principle that will get us out of these crises a lot quicker than protectionism particularly would.
Yeah, and it's such a good principle to get back to come back to. So let me take you on to something else that we mentioned yesterday, but we didn't go to. A couple of years ago, you asked me a very interesting question that was, I can still remember you asked me the question, Mike, do you like jazz music? And I hummed and hawed, not too sure that I like jazz music. And you then told me about the 8th beat. And we actually did a whole workshop with a big accounting organization called the 8th Beat. I don't know if you can remember the towels that we got with the little,
I still use it.
Music we got on it. And I must be honest, I doubted you for a while until I watched La La Land. And La La Land, the musical, confirmed exactly what you were saying about bass notes. And what we sow is what we reap, is a bass note. But Dave, share with us a little bit about that 8th beat, because it's been quite life-changing for myself and something I use so often with teams and in workshops.
Yes, so I am a piano player, as you know, and I enjoy jazz. And it's often, if you listen to jazz, it can seem that at times all the instruments are going off on all sorts of differing kind of places. It can almost seem chaotic at times within the music if you just turned on and turned off for certain parts. But the fascinating thing about jazz music is that every 8th beat, all of the instruments come down on that beat, and then from that beat, they then can go off. The piano could play at 16/4, the drums could be playing at 32/2, the electric guitarist could be playing in a different formation. But all of these beats, although they seem chaotic between beat 1 and beat 8, on that 8th beat, they syncopate together and they come down and they come back as one. And I think, the best jazz pianists, the best jazz musicians in the world are counting continuously in their head, so that they once you understand these are the pillars, these are the stakes in the ground that are uncompromising. It gives you great freedom to express outside of the beat 1 and the beat 8. And so you can go off into all these wonderful tangents, and in essence, that's what creates jazz, right? And so let's think about it in our own lives. What are the 8th beat? What are the stakes in the ground that form the 1 and the 8 beats in our life? That plodding rhythm that keeps us grounded and cemented together, that then allows times of crisis to come, that can seem to be unrhythmic, take us off our routines, make us feel like we are disjointed in some way. But then there is a groundedness as we come back to that 8th beat that brings, and there's a yes in our being. And I think that's the principle of the 8th beat, which I think we need to do many more workshops on that, frankly, Mike.
Yeah. And so 8th beats are bass notes which create order in disorder. And when we're talking about principles are part of our 8th beats, just like our values might be, just like certain mantras, scriptures. They things which bring us back to a place of centeredness when the world's potentially going its own way. So that's I've always found that absolutely helpful to myself. And sometimes I look at teams and I say, we need some eighth beats. We need some bass notes for this team. Yes, we want you to create, but we need you to come back. And if you just apply it to right now, I listen to the news and I become all maybe overwhelmed. I begin to think of the future and I begin to become overextended. And then I go back to the eighth beats, such as, hey, Mike, what you sow, you're going to reap. Hey, Mike, there's an impermanence to almost everything. And the eighth beat just begins to create the dance again. That's controlled. That's, hey, we've got this. Mm. And I think it's a beautiful question. And as we're talking about eighth beats and principles, is what are yours that bring you back to the song?
It is a beautiful principle. When you're teaching, to answer your question, when you're teaching someone to drive a car, when they first learn to change the gears, they take their eyes off the steering wheel and they look at the gear stick and then the car goes all over the place. Until after a while, the changing of the gear becomes automatic. It's instinctive in you. But then, like the 8-beat, there are some principles that become automatic, instinctive in us. But, sometimes a big enough wave of chaos comes on us. We need to turn up the volume of the bass, because if you lose sight of the bass, then you can lose the whole pattern. And I think in times like these, we need to turn up the volume, turn up the bass, as it were. I love the sow and reap principle. What am I saying today? What am I saying to myself? What am I sowing into today, into tomorrow? Do I have an overwhelming belief that all things will ultimately work together for good? Do I challenge the internal story inside me? For me, my base note is, I believe that ultimately everything will work out for its good. It's a story that just goes on as a rhythm inside my mind. So do not fear, because it will be okay. It will ultimately be good. And I think I'm tempted to always rewind tape in my head and make sure that I am replaying the right story in my mind. So the principle of ensuring that the story is right. So otherwise the noise can bend the truth in all sorts of directions. I think that is exactly what we need to be doing in this time, turning up the bass, making sure we understand what are the guiding principles that we believe for.
Yeah. So a good practice for us and whoever listens is to probably just write down a couple of your 8-beat bass notes. Like you just mentioned, yours being all things will work out, all things will work together for the good. And to then probably just remind yourself of these, especially when you maybe feel yourself a little bit anxious, a little bit overwhelmed, just go back and reconnect.
Yes. Yeah. I was talking to somebody yesterday or the day before, and they were saying that they need to do things that reconnects them to passion. For me, I need to go back and play the piano, because it reconnects me with creativity and passion. And one of the 8th beats in my life is creativity. And one of my challenges also would be, what are you doing today that connects you with your passion? And find that place wherever it might be, because that passion is the life force that's within us. It helps us, get through these times.
Yeah. Something that I find quite helpful is, especially if we're talking about the 8th beats, is we entrench these in our lives when the world's a good place, so that when the world's a dark place, they're already there. And I know you would have definitely heard me share this story, but it's one that I always do in conjunction when engaging the 8th beat. But it comes from Roz Zander, and she is co-author to the book Art of Possibility with Ben Zander, one of my favorite books. But she tells a story about going White River rafting, and she says that they would practice on like a grass bank. And she shares how she gets quite frustrated with the young instructor, who every now and again shouts out head to toes. And when the young instructor shouts out head to toes, they have to pretend to fall out their kayak, and they have to try and get their head in as close a position to their toes as is possible. And she says after a while, this drill becomes a little bit frustrating, embarrassing. let's just get onto the water. When they do eventually get onto the water, she shares how they go down the rapids. And I think she says at the very, very first rapids, she falls out her kayak. And in the swirling water, all she hears is the young instructor's voice shouting, head to toes. And she gets into a head to toes position because it's the safest position in the swirling water. And it's an 8 beat, head to toes, head to toes.
I love
but
that.
We discover our 8 beats, hopefully when the world's a good place, so that when we're in a tough place, they're already drilled into us.
Yes.
And it does beg an interesting question. How well are you using the sunshine? So when the world's a good place, are you using the sunshine to create the strength? And here's a bit of a challenge, Davey, and I know we're probably out of time now, but here's a bit of a challenge. Some of us are trying to build resilience in a horrid time when possibly it should have been built when the world was a good place. And
Absolutely.
It could be why there's a little bit of threat or anxiousness at the moment. And yeah, because resilience is a muscle that we build so that we can use it when the times are tough.
It's make hay in times of sunshine. I think as a principle, maybe we can discuss it in our next podcast. For me, is the principle of being present, and maybe we can discuss that in our next time. I think our time is up. Mike, it's been really, really great talking to you. May we find that 8th beat, and maybe reconnect that and feel grounded again.
Davey, always good chatting to you too. So from a rainy Durban, I don't know if you can hear the rain in the background, but it's absolutely beautiful. From a rainy Durban, chat to you tomorrow.
Speak to you soon. Thanks.